Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of Office Hours, Hot for Teacher, name of the episode. This is episode number 15, episode 1-5. We've been doing this for 15 episodes now, and I gotta tell you, I'm glad to be back. Let's talk about what Hot for Teacher is, because, you know, it's possible that you might have showed up being like, this is Adam Coble. He's going to talk about role-playing games. And I probably will. But that's not the focus of today's show. The focus of today's show is relationships, right? Welcome to Hot for Teacher, the show where we try to find out if relationships are more than just the thing you paid for in character creation. There you go. There's my tabletop role-playing game reference. So it's a relationship write-in advice show. It's built on the same framework as the OG Office Hours. You come in and you fill out a form on my website, adam-coble.com, and you fill out that form on the Hot for Teacher page, and you ask me questions about relationships. They could be about your relationships. They could be about theoretical relationships. They could be about relationships in general. We could talk about love. We could talk about friendship. We could talk about sex. We're going to talk about some sex stuff today. The quandaries of human interaction are all laid out before us. And the idea here is that relationships speak to tabletop role-playing games in a way that we sort of discover doing Office Hours, and that a lot of role-playing game advice is just relationship advice. So I thought, you know what? Why not just give out some general relationship advice? Because I have had relationships. I think about them a lot. It's something I like to do mindfully in my life. I've read some books. I have some expertise. I'm old, and maybe you're not, so I can share some of my experiences with you. So let's do this. Let's do this thing. But hey, you know what? Before we start today's episode, I have a preface for you. I have a preface. This is a preface about sex, or in fact, a lack thereof. So I was looking through the list of this week's questions, trying to pick out what 3 I wanted to answer, and I realized there are a lot of questions in my Hot for Teacher mailbox about basically the same stuff, right? Questions like, I am interested in starting a relationship, but I'm not that interested in doing sex stuff. Or I've just started dating and I don't feel comfortable with engaging the sex part of dating. Or recently I've come out as asexual and I am struggling with that in my life. Or do I need sex to have a meaningful, intimate couple type relationship with a person? There are enough of these questions phrased in the same way that I kind of feel like it warranted taking a minute at the beginning of the episode and just like talking about it to y'all all at once. Asexual folks, people who think they might be asexual, folks who aren't feeling like they're into doing sex stuff right now, people in relationships that don't contain a sexual component, you're all okay. The desire to do sex stuff with someone is not a prerequisite for a meaningful relationship. Okay? People have spent thousands and thousands of years in relationships in which sex is not an element, and they've been getting along great. Sex, like a lot of things that make up relationships, is just it's just an activity. It's an activity that's sometimes unfairly tied up in the way we value intimacy, but it's an activity nonetheless. An activity with a lot of social pressure and weight. It's a thing that is thick with gravity, that takes up a lot of space in our culture. It can be tied up in love. It can be tied up in our sense of freedom or independence or codependence. Sex can be affirming, or it can be traumatizing. It can be recreational or procreative. And yeah, like it can be a big deal, but it doesn't have to be. The absence of a thing doesn't invalidate you either as a potential partner or as a person. Whether you identify as asexual, whether you're in a no-touching phase of your life, whether it's something you're not, just not feeling like you want to be part of a specific relationship, the way that we interact with sex, while complex, it can just not be present, right? The human experience, which is to say art, music, travel, friendship, romance, whatever, can include sex, but for lots of people it doesn't. And for lots more relationships, it's just not an element. So I guess what I'm trying to get at here is that sex is as big or as small a part of any relationship as the people in those relationships choose to make it. Excluding sex from your relationship may end up alienating folks who want sex stuff from you, but if that's a non-negotiable part of relating to them, it's probably not going to be a good relationship for you anyhow, right? I just want to reaffirm that the desire to have sex with a person, with any person, doesn't have to be a good or bad thing innately. So just because you don't want to talk about comic books or go hiking, or you don't want to learn to paint, doesn't mean that you're not a worthwhile, interesting, cool person to be around. It just means you don't necessarily get close to people who like comics or go hiking or aspire to paint. Same deal for sex. It's just a thing, like anything else, meaningless inherently and given meaning by the people who choose to participate in it. Sex or no sex, you are a person worth engaging with. Okay? Try not to forget that. Your relationships are meaningful, and it's okay to have intimate connections with people, whether sex is a factor or not. Now, I would love to believe that that's common sense. I'd love to believe that we all just know that already, that just because someone doesn't share the same activity, interest, or desires as you doesn't mean that they are not worth having a relationship with. But I hope reaffirming that and just saying it will nudge people who are struggling with a sense that they need to include a sexual component in their relationship, or that are struggling with identifying as asexual, towards feeling a little bit more normal. In the sense that anybody wants to be more normal. Normalcy is overrated. But what I'm saying is you're not an aberration. It's okay to not want to do this stuff. For some folks, sex is cool and important, and for others, it's not. Either way, whatever you're feeling is okay and fine. Cool? Cool. All right. Let's answer a question about sex stuff, for example. All right. A Scorpio has given us quite a lot of text to absorb. Let me read it to you. Okay. So, a Scorpio says, "We are hetero, married, and monogamous. My spouse has, over the years, lost most of her sex drive. I think it is, at least in part, due to physical and mental health issues. She still expresses wanting to engage in smooching and smushing our stuff together. Gross. And she likes the idea, but finds herself not being in the mood for anything. I'm always the one to initiate any attempts, which most often deflate quickly. We've talked about this. She's indicated that she feels pressure to engage in sex as part of her duties as a spouse. Ugh. Blah, blah. Gross. Gross. We all think that's gross. We understand. And she thinks she's being unfair to me. We did used to bump uglies regularly. Can we just pause for a second, a Scorpio? Can we just pause for one quick second? Using the phrase bump uglies makes me not want to have sex with you. I know this is a serious question and I'm taking it lightly, but we'll answer the serious stuff when we get to it. That is a phrase. That is a turn of phrase. I've expressed that I don't want to pressure her into anything she doesn't enthusiastically consent to. Good work. I can wait. I've waited for a long time before. Despite our efforts, I still feel like the whole thing is a negative spiral for her and not helpful for getting in the right headspace. Do you have any advice for dispelling this specter of sexuality? Now, I think it's interesting, as a Scorpio myself and as someone who has been subjected to the silliness that is assumptive ideas about that, I find it really, really interesting that a Scorpio self-identified that way, because Scorpios, according to the horseshit of the zodiac, are a type of people who like to bump uglies, for whom sex is very important. So there's this whole textual area saying like, it's okay, I can wait, I'm patient, this is fine. But there's a subtext, there's a very subtle subtext that I'm reading in your choice, a Scorpio, to say, yeah, but I'm a Scorpio and I need to bang. We need to do that shit. So it's an interesting, I'm not going to pick apart the text because whatever, people write things and it illustrates stuff and whatever, but let's talk about this as an issue, because I think a lot of people, I would go so far as saying that every relationship in which sexual desire is a component undergoes a shifting of sorry, I got distracted because the chat gave me a notice that if chat's content was being offensive, I could moderate my settings because y'all were saying some lewd things. That's amazing. That's so great. Anyway, so what I'm getting at here is I think that every relationship that includes sex has involved some degree of tension, or at the very least understanding that sexual desire shifts and changes. This is not abnormal. This is not abnormal at all. What you're seeing, I think, here when it comes to this sort of stuff is not only about you and your spouse, but a problem that originates in her internalized pressure that stems from an external norm about what a relationship should be like, right? There's a narrative at play, a cultural narrative at play that tells your spouse, honey, sex is a given in marriage. And if you don't have sex with your husband, bad things will happen to you and your marriage. And possibly worst of all, willingness to have sex is a woman's job in a marriage, which is just such fucked up bullshit. Can we just, we all agree, I think, all of that is horseshit. But cultural narratives, especially gendered cultural narratives, can be so hard to shake off. Even though consciously, I'm sure that your spouse doesn't think you're lying when you say it's okay if we don't have sex, there can be an element of distrust that develops because of all the pressure in the other direction, right? It's important to recognize that this kind of thing, I don't think for you and your wife, especially for you, I don't think it's super important for you to pathologize her behavior and her feelings. I don't think it's important for you to like work out the origins. And I say this because you mentioned that you think that it's in part due to physical and mental health issues. Cool. But I don't think that's salient to the conversation. It's not that it's not generally unimportant. It's not that, you know, she should work this out. This is absolutely something that she should talk about with her doctor and with her therapist or her counselor. But I think it's specifically unimportant because as the subject of the problem, which is you are part of this problem. Not that you're causing it, but you are an element thereof. You can't also be the cure. The root of this issue, the root of this problem is that you want to have sex. Although, yes, it's not so significant a want, you can't put it aside. You deprioritize it for other things. And that's cool and nice. But the problem is you want to have sex and she does not. End of story. That's the problem. It's not that she has mental health issues. The problem is not that she has physical health issues. Those may be causing some of this stuff. But the root of this problem is I want and you don't want. Yes and no. Please, no thank you, right? Monogamy, which is to say the structure you've chosen for your relationship, adds a complicating condition in that y'all don't want to have sex at all because you're not having sex with each other, which is fine. That's your choice. Having an intimate, meaningful relationship with each other and not having sex as part of that intimate, meaningful relationship is totally okay. We talked about this already, right? I think that it's okay to acknowledge that you want to get to a place where you can have sex with your spouse. And it sounds like your spouse wants that too. And that's cool. That's great. That's fine. you want to do it for the right reasons and you want it to feel good for both of you and you're bought in on enthusiastic consent, and that's great. What I think you should do, though, instead of attempting to help her find a solution to the problem, I think there's some other approaches that you can take to help and to assist. So I think that it might be helpful to be a little more upfront about the whole thing, right? Like I'm not saying you're not, but I've been on both sides of the I don't want to have sex with you anymore, right now, ever again equation. I've been on both sides of that in lots of different ways, and I think that it's difficult no matter what. This isn't easy for either of you. But the more honest you can be about your feelings and about the situation, the better, right? Quelle surprise, communication is helpful. If the two of you are able to sit down and address the stuff that's happening without that conversation being about how do we fix it, or about comforting each other necessarily, or doing emotional support while you're trying to talk it out, it can help, right? We get to this place sometimes with people we care about, or at least I know that I've had the experience where you want to make someone feel better, or you want to ease their concern, and so you end up focusing on that instead of communicating your truth, right? So you are willing to say like, oh, don't worry about me. Don't think about the fact that I am feeling like I want to have sex and I'm not getting it. Don't worry about that. Let's just worry about you. And it's nice to feel like that, but I think it's dangerous to martyr our own desires in that way. So here's what I think you should do. Sit down together. Even better than just sitting down together, sit down together with a counselor. Sit down together with a therapist. Buy someone's help in this regard and be like, I am here to hear what you're thinking and feeling about sex stuff right now without interrupting, without judging, or without my own stuff getting in the way. And then I'm here to take my turn. I'm here to talk about what I'm thinking, talk about what I'm feeling, and I'm here to acknowledge that while I want to be supportive, I am definitely not down to just never, ever have sex again. That's not I don't want that in my life. I want to support you, but let's be real, right? Lay shit out and say, so here's where we're at. Because if you want sex stuff and she doesn't want sex stuff, you have a fundamental monogamy problem, and it's only going to go one of three ways, as far as I can see it, right? Either you will stop wanting to have sex forever, or she'll start wanting to have sex with you. I think that's the optimal, is that you get back to a place where you both want to sex each other. Or thirdly, you'll want to have sex and she won't, and either you'll find it elsewhere or you'll resent her and it'll poison the relationship, which we don't want that. That's the bad ending. There is no future, as I see it, where the current situation that you're in is tenable. I think the trick that we run into in these situations is the promise to say, I can wait. Just leaves the pressure and tension unresolved. What we can think we're doing is giving someone space, right? If we say to someone, don't worry, take your time, I can wait, doesn't actually give them room necessarily, because I can wait means I'm waiting, right? Don't worry, I am patient. I am patient and gentle and fine, and that's good, but you're also saying, like, keep an eye on the clock. When is it time, right? Every day, every minute, every second, some tiny part of your brain, however irrelevant, however small, is still thinking, now? How about now? And she's going to know that. She's going to be aware that you're waiting for her. You're waiting for her to change, waiting for her to get better, waiting for her to want to do sex stuff with you again. Better to say, I think, I want this to be different. How can we do that? And then work together and look for a change. You got to be flexible about what change might look like. And remember, you can't go backwards. This isn't about regaining the way the relationship used to be. This is about, let's go forward to a future where our relationship contains only the things that make us both happy. Don't pretend, however nice and affirming that it might feel, to be supportive and a good person who doesn't need to have sex with their partner, but is sustained by pure love and the Samaritan act of self-denial, that you're okay with things as they are, because you're not. That's what this is. You're explicitly not okay. It's okay to be patient and to be gentle, and in fact you should, absolutely, but like, don't pretend you're okay with it, because that's lying. And we don't lie to the people we love. Pretending like a thing that is disruptive to our relationship isn't disruptive will not help anybody. So here's the thing. You can say your piece, you can let her do the same when you work it out, preferably with a counselor, right? She's going to need to work out if sex with you is a thing she feels like she wants to work towards or not. And if it isn't, y'all have to rebuild around that. And if it is, she's going to need to work on ways to get there. And that's going to be work. And that work has to be done without a deadline. Because since you're married, I don't know if you remember that whole till death do us part, for better or worse thing. You're married to this person, and unless you think this is a divorceable, this is the thing that makes me confused about marriage. Ostensibly, you've agreed to stick it out. So you don't really need to say I can wait, because monogamy means you're not going to go bone anybody else. You have promised to stick it out when things are hard, and now you just have to wait. So you don't have to even say that. Of course you will. You agreed to it in the legally binding agreement you made back when you got married. Anyway, I don't know the details of your marriage, but the point here is this feels to me like it's going to be one of those better or worse situations. You have to let go of your needs to have sex with another person and just let her work that out. You can help and support her in doing so, right? Encourage her to go to counseling, encourage her to see a doctor, encourage her to work the shit out on her own and with your support. But like, absolutely engage a professional or multiple professionals in this process. Now, in the meantime, my good man, there's another relationship we're completely ignoring here. There's another relationship that you have that I hope is intimate and is close and is beneficial to you. I hope that this relationship is a little sexy from time to time. And that's the relationship you have with yourself, right? I feel like we forget, or we joke about, or we commodify, in a way, sex with other people as being so super important that sex with ourselves isn't relevant anymore. But like, if you're able to have a good, healthy, exciting, varied sexual relationship with your own damn self, that allows you to take on the responsibility for your own sexual fulfillment and not put all the pressure of yon wife to do the sex for you, right? You got a relationship with your own self, so work that shit out. You have agreed to be monogamous with this person, but nobody, and I say again, nobody can take away your relationship with yourself, nor should you. And if anybody ever tries, if you're dating someone and they're like, listen, while we're together, I don't want you messing with your stuff. That's my stuff now. Your genitals belong to me. Fuck that person. Or, I mean, don't fuck. Tell them to get lost. Because that shit is so super important. This not being just about you, your marriage, making someone else deal with your sexual desires. You can have a meaningful sexual relationship with yourself, and you should. And it's going to cause tension. This whole situation is just, it's not going to get simple and easy. But if your spouse knows you're a responsible adult, willing to take your sexual well-being into your own hands, or whatever works for you, and trust that you're not just sitting there all day looking at your watch, waiting to see if it's fuck o'clock yet. You're going to give your wife space to grow and heal as a person. which she obviously needs. So do that. And in the meantime, get down with your bad self. It's going to help both of you. Now, I want to address, because I think that this is one of those situations where I was recently accused on YouTube, so take it with a grain of salt, but I was recently accused of suggesting non-monogamy to everybody that asks a question, which I feel like that's an unfair assessment. But okay, whatever. You can make your own call whether that's something I do. And they said, like, you sound like a vegan talking to people who eat meat. That you're just like, you should go vegan. Just being vegan would fix this. Stop eating meat, which I don't believe. I don't think non-monogamy is for everybody. I think that in most ways, it's actually really hard to be non-monogamous. In this case, I would never suggest it. Monogamy is not the problem, right? I think there are other things that are way more important than trying to use. Non-monogamy is not a fix for things like jealousy. It's not a fix for people who feel like they're not getting the sex that they need in their life. It can be a way to change your relationship, or it can be a way to enter into relationships in which monogamy's concerns are not present, right? If monogamy is causing you harm, then yes, non-monogamy and polyamory and relationship anarchy and whatever else you want to call it, whatever way you might want to practice that is fine. But like, I'm not here to proselytize a specific form of relationship. I think that if you've made the decision, I want to respect you for making the decision of being monogamous. I have to assume that you're doing it on purpose, that you didn't just accidentally get married. But it can absolutely be something that makes this kind of thing worse, not better. Your spouse, a Scorpio, may come to learn that it's not that she doesn't want to have sex at all. It may be that she doesn't want to have sex with you. That is a possibility. And that's something you need to be okay with. Not in the sense that you need to just accept it. It's that you need to accept that it might happen. And if it does, if she goes to a counselor and goes to a therapist and works this out and then comes back to you and says, yo, I figured it out. I just don't think you're hot anymore. You just don't get me going. That is possible. And maybe that's a deal breaker. Maybe for you, you say, okay, well, I want to be married to someone who does want to bone me, so let's talk about getting a divorce. That's acceptable. You might also say, okay, that's cool. I love our marriage as is, but I am in need of sexual interaction with other people. If you don't want to have sex with me, let's rebuild the structures of our marriage such that I can do that. And let's talk about what that would look like. Every relationship is a series of ongoing negotiations, and it's about building a thing that you both feel comfortable and loved and supported and happy with. And maybe sex is a part of your relationship with this woman, and maybe it's not. That's something you will figure out. So be there. Be the loving husband. And be the loving husband in the sense that you love this person and you want them to be happy. But also be yourself. Love thyself, my man, because you deserve to be happy too. I'm just saying, be flexible, but don't just give up. That monogamy is not your problem. Be adaptive. Let your wife have space. Support her without pressure or expectation. And both of y'all, see a professional, whether together or separately. It fucking helps. It helps so much. So much. All right. Question numero dos. Question number 2 comes from Correctomondo. And question 2 sounds like one we've heard before, but it takes a hard twist at the end that I'm actually really excited to talk about. So Correctomondo says, this year I moved back to my hometown. I ended a 3-year relationship. That is tough. A move and a relationship end that is significant shit. Okay, so I moved back to my hometown. I ended a 3-year relationship. I've replaced that loss with the only thing I could, role-playing games. Been there. I'm very happy with the hobby, but I still feel that when the game's over and each goes back to their regular lives, I'm left alone. I have some other friends from where I used to live here back then, but it's not the same. Let's say they're a bunch of closed-minded stoners that tend to lock themselves in and not do anything. There's some overlap with both groups, but I feel like I shouldn't demand them more than what they give me as is. I'm sure that I need to know new people, but when you're 23, that can be kind of hard. Any thoughts on how I should cope with these feelings of loneliness in this transitional period? So what's great about this is this question isn't how do I meet people? This question isn't how do I make friends? It isn't how do I grow my intimate relationships? The question here is just how do I get through it? How do you get through it? How do you survive feeling lonely? Liminal social states are never easy. Feeling in between is never smooth. Unless you're the kind of person that doesn't get attached to social structures easily and you like moving around a lot, I think for most folks, the way we're socialized, liminal states are very difficult. Moving locations, uprooting yourself, planting yourself somewhere else is a thing that I think everyone has undergone at least a couple of times in their lives. Anybody that's old enough to have been moved around, whether you were a kid and you moved from school to school or moving away from your hometown for the first time or switching jobs, moving for a job, the reasons can vary, but that feeling of being in a new place and not being able to connect to people can be scary or weird. Even moving home, right? There's a phrase, right? There's a phrase it's a aphorism for a reason. You can't go home, right? Even if you return home to your closed-minded stoner shut-in friends, you're different. You've moved away, you've come home, things have changed. It's not the same. You can't step in the same stream twice. So we've talked before about the innate challenges of like being an adult, right? Making new friends, engaging socially. And I think you're covering the first step of that pretty well. Right? You're doing the shared activity thing. You're enabling social engagement through other stuff. You're playing role-playing games. That's putting you at the table with other people you might be able to build connection with. But it sounds like you're having trouble with the next bit. While you're taking those fledgling and focus connections and trying to grow them into something more meaningful and craving connection to folks outside that weekly connection, you're feeling maybe like there's some friction. You're having a hard time building that, right? Now, what I like about this question is that you're not asking me how to fix it. You know, I've given that advice before. Watch previous episodes. We've talked about how to build a role-playing game group into actual all-the-time friendships. This is a whole other thing. And it's something that, for me, I had to dig pretty hard to like make some notes about because loneliness isn't something I tend to experience very much. This isn't to say that I haven't felt alone or that I don't, on some deep philosophical cosmic level, feel like every human being is ultimately alone. It's not that I've never felt lonely because I'm surrounded by my close friends and being social all the time. It's more that for me, my loneliness feelings trigger is not very sensitive. I can go for long stretches of time without ever really interacting with anyone and not like feel squirrely about it. I would be a great person to put on like a Mars mission because I don't need that direct connection with a bunch of people to feel, I don't know, I don't miss people or feel disconnected unless there's a specific act of disconnection, right? For me, loneliness is sort of hard to come by. And when I do feel that way, because it does happen, like I'm disconnected from people, for me, small acts of reconnection can be really helpful, right? Whether that's a text message, a short phone call with somebody, an email, writing a letter, reading an old letter they've written me. Those reconnections, those little things can abbreviate periods of isolation or loneliness. For me, keeping busy is really important to my overall mental health, right? If I don't have time for negative ideation to get wormed in there to be like, Adam, you're sad. Adam, you're sad and lonely and nobody likes you. If I am too busy to think those thoughts, they don't affect me, right? For me, coping with loneliness is about reminding myself that I'm not alone. Reminding myself that I do have these connections, right? Connections to my friends, connections to my family, connections to you nerds. You help me. That helps me feel a meaningful connection to other humans. I think we can get caught up in feelings of not enough when it comes to our relationships, right? Feelings of like, well, my tabletop RPG group is nice, but I want more. I want deeper relationships from them. And that's tough because I think it can cause us to miss out on the stuff that we do have when we fixate on what we don't, right? You say that you have a group of people that you game with, but when they go home and they return to their regular lives, you're not a part of that. What makes you feel that way? What about their time with you feels exempt or not good enough? Why do you think that playing games with you doesn't count as a big part of their life? Because it's an activity they're actively choosing to do. They're spending time with you on purpose. Relationships of choice are the most important ones that we have. And these people are choosing to spend that time with you. I think what might be happening here is that you can lose sight of this when you strive to have a deeper connection and don't find it. You may be missing out on giving the relationships you have the value they deserve, right? And I guess that's what I'm getting at. This is the coping tactic. This is the thing. Gratitude. And I don't mean to say that you are being ingracious, but I think gratitude is a factor here for coping with this stuff. I think that gratitude is something that we don't really take much time to just stop and feel. It's sort of rare to be actively thankful. I think socially, gratitude just isn't considered very valuable, right? We exist in a cultural space that values ambition, values getting more than it values having. It values the new, the better over the existing. And when you're feeling lonely, reminding yourself of the things that you do have can be really helpful and reaffirming, right? Saying like, I have these people I get to play games with, and I'm really grateful for that relationship. They care about me. I contribute. We are making something together. And that can boost your feelings of self-worth. That can help you feel better about yourself and your place in their world. And thus, give you space to feel better about your space in the world in general, right? I think gratitude and reminding yourself that people do care about you and that you do have relationships that are of value can be really important, right? For me, like I have close friends that I get to see pretty rarely, right? I see them in person 2 or 3 times a year, if that. I have people that are very close to me, dear friends that I would love to be able to spend more time with, but who live in other countries, hours away. And that can feel lonely for me. That can feel sad. I can look at the town I live in and say, okay, I've got like 2 or 3 people I could hang out with, but like I have all these other friends far away and I can't reach out and touch them, literally or metaphorically. And so what I'll do is remind myself that that doesn't mean that they're not my friends. It doesn't mean that I am not meaningful to them. It doesn't mean that just because out of sight, out of mind, right? I find small ways to connect, but mostly I reflect alone, thinking about how I value their relationship and I value the friendship I have with them despite the hardship that can come from infrequency. So I don't know, that might be something that helps you, reflecting on what you do have to bolster your sense of place in the world while you build new things. And I know that you're working on creating more new, deeper relationships with people, and that's great. You should continue to do that, but that's not what I want to advise you about here. I want to advise you to be gentle with yourself, right? Nothing happens quickly when you're desperate for it. It never feels quick enough. It never feels big enough when you want it so badly. Instead, I think just take the time to appreciate the things that you do have and to bolster your positive connections, right? Reinforce what's already going on and use that as a solid ground to move to the next thing. It's hard to live with what we have when we focus on what we don't have. It's a bad and difficult habit to break. Next time you're feeling sad and disconnected, try to remember the good stuff about your RPG friends, about your stoner friends. Deepen and enrich those relationships without looking at them as being something that's lacking. And don't be scared to share those feelings, right? That's the next thing. Being grateful to those people for their relationship with you is going to reinforce it. Next time you play a role-playing game with your friends, tell them how meaningful that is for you, right? When you end a session, be like, hey, that was really fun. You guys, I really like and value this game that we get to play together. I love hanging out with you and playing RPGs. Thank you so much for being a part of this with me, right? They're going to appreciate that, and it's going to get them thinking, hey, you know what? I'm really thankful for this too. I'm really grateful for my relationship with you, and that's going to reinforce all of that stuff, and it's going to make it easier to connect more deeply with those people. Gratitude is so important. Gratitude and patience, and don't be so hard on yourself, right? I know it sucks feeling lonely, and there are ways that you can feel connection to people, even if it's not quite the deep connection that you want, while you're building that deeper connection. Being close to people is a weird experience, and if you're patient and you're not rushed, it can be a lot less frustrating. And I'm gonna say the same damn thing I said to a Scorpio: go see a counselor. Form a relationship with a professional. They will tell you much better tactics for your specific situation. And instead of just me telling you loosely based on a single paragraph how to solve your problem, they will give you specific tactics and advice on how to feel better about this stuff. Go see a counselor. Make it happen. It will help. I promise. Get professional help is like the talk to your players of Hot for Teacher. All right. So this last question, I would love to invite folks of all genders to engage with this question, to have feelings and thoughts about it. But I'm answering this question for men. This is a men question. Men, listen to me. If you identify as a man, this question is for me and you and all the other man types. It's very important, okay? Men, are you ready? Joel would like to know, how do I escape the man place? Ah, yes. The man place. Where we, men, must take all our feelings, bundle them up into a tight little ball, and jam them hard down inside. The impenetrable fortress for all of our feelings, where none may enter, and where our emotions go to die. Where all feelings that are not anger or hype or a single manly tear shed at the death of our warrior colleagues must be excised and ultimately molder away. Listen, what Joel is referring to here is a joke that I made once about the way that traditionally masculine video game protagonists tend to be unable to feel feelings. The man place is where your feelings go when you can't feel them. It is what men must do instead of having feelings and expressing them, is jam them deep down into a place where they can't surface and violate the impenetrable tenets of our masculine code, right? The man place is just a reference to toxic masculinity and the way that it fundamentally denies men an allowance to feel feelings. It's a discussion of the nature of masculinity and the cultural and societal pressure for masculine behavior to disinclude emotional expression. It is the lizard man Jars from Nebula Jazz. It is the joke that, or very real behavioral pressure that men are not allowed to have feelings, or rather, I don't know that we're encouraged not to have feelings. It's that we're often encouraged not to express them outside of very specific behaviors, which is bullshit, right? Because obviously people of all genders have a broad and exciting range of emotions that run the gamut, and we should, I would hope, expect that the expression of said emotions is as nuanced and varied as those feelings themselves and the people feeling them. However, it is often not so. The permission that we have to express our emotions is so often tied to our gender and becomes a part of the dance of gender expression, such that masculinity and refusal to acknowledge our emotions have gotten all tied up together. So what does one do when one is masculine identified but wants to express a feeling? What kinds of things prohibit us from simply opening the door to this bleak oubliette of emotional manliness and just walk away? Well, like our first question asker's wife, we're looking down the very deadly barrel of a long history of prescriptive gendered behavior and expectation. It can be very, very hard to just simply change things, even just within ourselves, that are externally very highly pressurized. Like, yes, we're in control of our behavior and we can make decisions about the things we do and don't do. And no, society is not actually physically stopping us from, say, crying when we feel sad. No one is coming to our house and staring at us with a knife in hand saying, don't you dare express emotion. If you cry at this insurance commercial, I'm going to get you. Like, no one's doing that. It's the fundamental societal pressure not to do it. It's the response that comes. It's the fear of how people will react to us. It is a reinforcement from childhood of negative response expectation that can be a lot to deal with. Many are the men who have, in their childhood, or as adults, been told to man up when expressing sadness, vulnerability, or just general emotional distress. Many are the young boys who are told, real men don't cry, or, oh, big boys don't cry. True masculinity does not include your emotional expression. We teach children to do this, to behave this way. We teach boys to be this way. Many are the men who, upon even attempting an expression of tenderness or vulnerability, are met with emasculating slurs. Things that are meant to, A, call into question your masculinity, B, imply that by negative association you're being a woman or gay, which is like a whole other thing, right? I think that criticizing a person for showing emotion, criticizing a man for showing emotion by emasculating him makes masculinity look bad. It makes femininity look weak by extension. It's just disgusting across the board. For many of us, even those whose parental figures were encouraging of a less constrained expression of vulnerability and masculinity, the subtle societal pressure and microaggressions allayed against men who are willing to show emotion can be too much to bear, even when considering opting out of that emotional man place of conventional masculinity. Even when you opt out, even when you say, listen, I'm saying this as a personal anecdote, even though I am very firmly someone who's like, fuck the man place, I need to be better at being open and vulnerable about my emotions, even to the people I am closest to. masculine pressure not to feel feelings and to be stoic and to be tough and to handle shit on my own still very much affects me. Because even though the people I love, I know feel the same way, even though I know they're like, it's okay if you want to cry when you are sad, or even if you want to express emotional vulnerability to me, that is okay. I really appreciate that. I want you to do that. Some part of me doesn't trust them. Some part of me has been raised not to believe them, and I keep a lot of my emotions to myself. It sucks, and it's hypocritical, and I'm trying to get over it, but this is a thing that everyone struggles with all the time. Every man has to deal with this. So how do we get out of that place? How do we get ourselves to a place where we're less afraid as men of feeling vulnerable and expressing our vulnerability? Moreover, how do we do that? And I think this is so important. How do we do that without subsequently taking up someone else's space? And by someone else, I mean someone who's not a man. What I'm imagining in this case is the situation where men have traditionally a woman in their life, usually a romantic partner, usually this is a girlfriend or a wife, who they feel comfortable or safe being emotional around, and as such are able to express their sadness, fear, anxiety around those people more freely. Now, there isn't anything wrong with having someone to support you, regardless of their gender, and because of the way that Western culture tends to parent, a lot of men feel emotionally safest around women because, I don't know, maybe your dad was the one calling you a fag because you cried at a cartoon or whatever. But probably it was your mom that took care of you. As a man, you probably had a woman in your life who was more accepting of your emotional vulnerability than the men role models you had. There is a sort of gender pattern we can fall into where the women we feel safest around have to take on a mom role for us when we need them for emotional support. And that is often very hard work, and it is often work that is not consented to. Sometimes part of the good girlfriend role is a woman who will tough through her boyfriend's emotional baggage, who will do that labor to teach her boyfriend how to be an emotionally sound person because his safety and vulnerability is somehow a gift to her, even if it is expected to do so. This is not universally the case. If you're hearing me say this and you're like, this doesn't sound like me, that's not real, that's fine. This isn't always the case. It's a pattern to look out for. When it really comes down to it, I think that the cure for this kind of claustrophobic, anti-emotional expression of masculinity lies in the hands of the gender with whom it fucks the most. I think that we, speaking as men, we need to take control of this shit. And we need to support each other through it. The people with privilege and the people who are affected by things, the best way to affect change is sort of turn inward on this stuff, right? I think the best thing, for example, the best way that white people can combat racism is to confront and engage with other white folks. Right? Men, in this case, need to act together as a support network and a safe environment in which they are able to make this better, right? We can do a better job of supporting each other, encouraging a more diverse, more emotionally in touch type of masculinity, in addition to all the tough, sweaty mustache lumberjacking we've been up to already, right? We can work together to redefine what being men looks like, and we can do so without excising the traditional understanding of masculinity by creating a more diverse masculinity, one that accepts and embraces a broader, more nuanced understanding of what being a man is like, right? I want to participate in a masculinity that can understand and express its emotions in a safe way. And the way that we get there is by supporting each other, by taking risks and supporting other men in taking risks, allowing and inviting other men to share their feelings, right? Instead of saying, you and Charlene broke up? Fuck that, man. Let's get wasted. Try, you and Charlene broke up? Dude, that must feel shitty. You want to talk about it? You don't have to give up. You can get wasted after, right? You can still do all the tough, sweaty mustache stuff if you want to. There is a ton of value in things that we consider traditionally masculine, but I want my masculinity to have room for all of those other things, right? I want to be able to ask other men about their feelings. I want to talk to each other about what we feel vulnerable or scared of. I want to engage other men in topics that might otherwise feel awkward or too traditionally femme for our understanding of masculinity. We're adding more good stuff on top of the tough beard, tattoo, whiskey drinking, punch fighting that we already do, right? Tell your male friends they look nice. Tell them you care about them. Express affection in non-violent ways. I want there to be room for kindness and gentleness in my masculinity right alongside all the more traditional stuff. I'm greedy. I want my gender to be allowed to do all kinds of shit. And I want to be allowed to present my masculinity in the ways that I want. And that shit's never going to happen unless I have the support of other men, right? If the definition of masculinity does not involve the expression of emotion, I don't qualify for masculinity anymore. And I don't think that's fair. So how do we do this practically? What actual steps can we take as men to do this? So what we can do is we can connect with other men that we trust, right? We can connect with men who want the same things, and we can talk to them about this stuff. We can have conversations with individuals who we feel safe and comfortable around. We can find groups of men whose masculinity allows for, includes, and encourages these things, and we can form communities around those groups. Right? We can support one another on those paths. We can spend time being a part of those communities. We can set a good example for other men, for teens, for boys, for each other. We can try to live a life that is unafraid of talking about our feelings. God knows it's hard. It's so hard because we've learned all these lessons about what masculinity is, and we feel at some level we're betraying it. We can do all of this stuff. We can make mistakes, and we can stumble, and we can hold each other as men accountable for doing better. It's a slow road, but it's absolutely something that's possible. The benefits, too, are for everyone, right? The work that we do doesn't just benefit men. It benefits people of all genders, because when we're able to encourage emotional expression, vulnerability, and openness, we give men new tools to be who they are and feel what they feel. More tools means less reliance on the only few we have. If we give men permission to feel sad instead of feeling angry, maybe they're going to feel sad instead. We reduce things like violent lashing out because there are other avenues. A lot of the time we learn that there are only a couple of acceptable ways as men to show off that we are having a feeling. Happiness can turn into anger. Sadness can turn into anger. If all of our relationships get filtered through this very limited view, we lose so much nuance. And we end up in a place where men are seen as angry and dangerous and violent. And I think that this is something that is not universal, but it is an element. And by broadening our understanding of the way we can express ourselves, we do ourselves a service, we do the rest of the world a service. Everyone gets better. We all get a better time out of all of this. It's so important. So if you're a man, I hope some of this has sunk in a little for you. I hope that this sounds like something that you would want to pursue alone or with other men that you know. I would love to see this sort of change in what is or isn't masculinity. I would love to see this kind of change express itself in the world. I would love to see a world where it's okay to be a man in a bunch of different ways. I want everyone to be able to express their gender in ways that feels comfortable for them. Yes, even men, perhaps especially men, because they don't get to examine their gender in the way that a lot of other people do. I think queer folks, we're forced to. I think queer folks are forced to examine their gender. They're forced to think about what it means to be non-binary or trans. They have to. It's a survival thing. But a man, for the most part, can just be a man in the way that is prescribed for them by society. And that sucks. I don't want to live a prescribed life. I don't like playing by the rules. And I don't think you should either. And if you come to a place where you're like, yeah, I just don't feel like expressing any emotion that's outside of a traditional understanding of masculinity, that's okay. For you, that's your expression, and it's real. I just want everyone to have a chance to understand it themselves. I think it's really important work, and I think that it's time to leave the man place behind. This has been episode 15 of Hot for Teacher, and I hope that whatever your gender, it has been interesting and informative, and more than anything, I hope that this is the beginning of a conversation for you, that this is not the be-all and end-all. I hope that this is a place where you can begin thinking about and talking about these topics with your friends and your loved ones. Go out there. Think about your masculinity today, men. Think about the ways in which you express your feelings. Next time you have a feeling, think about what it feels like to express it. I just want to get that stuff in your head. That's all that I want. Thank you for coming, everybody. We will see you next time for more Hot for Teacher. If you have a question, if you want to get involved, you can go to my website. It's www.adam-koble.com. There's a Hot for Teacher link in there. Just fill out the form, and I will get to your question or one suitably like it as we continue in the episodes. Thanks for coming, everybody. See you next time.